This is what the UFC heavyweight division looked like in 2013, when the UFC rankings first became a thing. We're going to go forward in time to see how exactly the heavyweight division has played out in the past 5 years, and how we got to where we are today. So let's get started. The first change in the rankings came when Daniel Cormier defeated Frank Mir, bumping Daniel Cormier to second in the rankings and Frank Mir off the top 5. Cain Velasquez versus Bigfoot Silva. Cain Velasquez won, but there was no change. Then Fabricio Werdum defeated Big Nog, but there was no change. Alistair Overeem's time in the top 5 didn't last long. He lost to Travis Browne, meaning that Browne replaced him as the number 5 heavyweight. Cain Velasquez then beat Junior Dos Santos in their third fight. That didn't affect the rankings. As well, Daniel Cormier defeated Roy Nelson at the same event. No change in the rankings, but he did announce his move to light heavyweight, which will impact the rankings. Continuing the trend of the rankings not changing, Bigfoot Silva and Mark Hunt went to a draw. There was no change in the rankings. And then a little bit later, Travis Browne defeated Josh Barnett, but again, no change in the rankings. Now, we haven't had a rankings change in a bit, but things outside of fighting affect the rankings too. Bigfoot Silva fails a post-fight drug test. He gets bumped off of the rankings, and Daniel Cormier drops a couple of spots because he has announced his move to light heavyweight, which puts Fabricio Werdum up to number 2 and Cormier down to number 4. And at the end of 2013, these are the rankings. We have Mark Hunt in at number 7, Stipe Miocic making his rankings debut at number 8, Frank Mir down to 10, and Alistair Overeem, who is in the top 5, all the way down to number 9. Daniel Cormier at the beginning of 2014 continues his descent as he ascends the light heavyweight division, defeating Patrick Cummins. He is now bumped off of the heavyweight division rankings. Fabricio Werdum then beats Travis Browne to claim the number 1 contendership position at heavyweight. Now let's look at the entire top 10, because Stipe Miocic defeats Fabio Maldonado, which bumps him all the way up to 5th, even though Fabio Maldonado wasn't ranked at the time. Bigfoot Silva is then removed from the heavyweight rankings due to his failed drug test. Stipe Miocic up 1, Josh Barnett back in the top 5. Mark Hunt then defeats Roy Nelson, giving him a top 5 position. And then a championship fight between Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Werdum doesn't happen because Cain Velasquez gets injured. Mark Hunt replaces Cain Velasquez, and him and Werdum fight for an interim title. Them fighting for the title bumps up Mark Hunt by 1 spot. But unfortunately for Hunt, that number 4 ranking doesn't last long. He loses to Fabricio Werdum, bumping him back down to number 5. Travis Browne then defeats Brendan Schaub. This doesn't have a change in the rankings, because why would it? And then a huge fight at heavyweight. Junior Dos Santos defeats Stipe Miocic, but it didn't change anything in the rankings. Both guys stayed in their respective spots. And this is what the end of 2014 looks like. You have ARLOVSKI out of nowhere climbing the rankings. He's at number 7 now, and Ben Rothwell at number 10. Roy Nelson also fitting in at number 9, and Bigfoot Silva is back on the rankings after serving his suspension. Stipe Miocic starts off the year right, defeating Mark Hunt. That doesn't move him, but it bumps Hunt off of the top 5, and Barnett back up to number 5. And as I mentioned before, ARLOVSKI climbing the rankings. He defeats Travis Browne, shaking up the entire top 10. ARLOVSKI comes in at number 4, Stipe Miocic up to 3rd, Travis Browne down to number 5. And then the biggest change at heavyweight, Fabricio Werdum defeats Cain Velasquez, winning the championship and bumping Cain Velasquez down to number 1. ARLOVSKI then defeats Frank Mir, solidifying his spot in the top 5, but it didn't change anything. And then another huge change in the rankings. Junior Dos Santos lost to Alistair Overeem, bumping him from the number 2 spot and putting Alistair Overeem in at number 5. ARLOVSKI benefits, bumping up to number 2. And this is how heavyweight looked at the end of a very eventful 2015. It was the first time in the history of the heavyweight division that Junior Dos Santos or Cain Velasquez lost to fighters that weren't Cain Velasquez or Junior Dos Santos. A huge turning point in the division where you see guys like Stipe Miocic, ARLOVSKI, and Fabricio Werdum at the top of the division that was dominated by Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos for so long. To begin the shift from the old to the new, Stipe Miocic defeats ARLOVSKI, bumping Stipe up to the number 2 contender position, Alistair Overeem rightly at number 3, ARLOVSKI at number 4, and Junior Dos Santos all the way down to 5. And then Ben Rothwell defeats Josh Barnett, bumping JDS off of the top 5 and Ben Rothwell to number 5. But fear not, Junior Dos Santos fans, as he defeats Ben Rothwell in his next fight, bumping him back up to number 4 and ARLOVSKI down to number 5, Rothwell off the top 5. Alistair Overeem then defeats ARLOVSKI, bumping ARLOVSKI off of the rankings, Stipe down 1 as Overeem becomes the number 2 contender. Then Miocic, he doesn't like to be bumped down. He doesn't like people over him. He wants to be champion, and that's exactly what happened. Stipe Miocic defeats Fabricio Werdum, becoming the champion at heavyweight, bumping Werdum, Velasquez, and Overeem down a spot. We then have a bunch of fights that don't affect the rankings, but hear me out. Cain Velasquez defeats Travis Browne, doesn't change the division at all. Fabricio Werdum then defeats Travis Browne. Again, doesn't change the division rankings at all. And then Stipe Miocic in his first title defense defeats the number 3 ranked Alistair Overeem. Doesn't change the division though. And at the end of 2016, this is what we are left with. We have ARLOVSKI back down to number 7, Derrick Lewis making his top 10 rankings debut, and Stefan Struve somehow hanging around in the top 10. And what better way to bring in the new crop than Francis Ngannou defeating ARLOVSKI? That shifts multiple fighters down and Francis Ngannou all the way to number 6 in the division. Derrick Lewis defeats Travis Browne, bumping him up to number 7, and then USADA runs amok on the division, defeating Ben Rothwell, giving Francis Ngannou his debut in the top 5 and bumping everybody up a spot. Alistair Overeem defeated Mark Hunt, but that didn't change anything in the division. Alexander Volkov defeats Roy Nelson, giving him his debut at number 10. Stipe Miocic defended his title again against Junior Dos Santos, but nothing changed in the division. And then Mark Hunt defeats Derrick Lewis, bumping Lewis down to 7. Marcin Tybura defeats ARLOVSKI, bumping ARLOVSKI off the rankings, and somehow Stefan Struve gets back into the top 10. Then Oleinik defeats Travis Browne, Browne gets bumped off, and Marcin Tybura gets into the top 10. Alistair Overeem defeats Fabricio Werdum, bumping Overeem up to the number 1 contendership position, and Werdum and Velasquez down to 2 and 3. And then USADA gets its second victory of the year, defeating Junior Dos Santos. Dos Santos bumps off of the rankings, and then Francis Ngannou gets bumped up to number 4. Volkov then defeats Stefan Struve, bumping Struve to number 10. Fabricio Werdum defeated Walt Harris. That made no change. Werdum then beat Marcin Tybura. That didn't change anything. Curtis Blaydes defeats Alexei Oleinik. Oleinik off the rankings, Blaydes number 9. And Francis Ngannou defeats Alistair Overeem, giving him the number 1 contendership position. And at the end of 2017, this is what the division looks like. Wow, what a change. You have longtime heavyweights, Ben Rothwell, Junior Dos Santos, ARLOVSKI, off of the rankings. You have new guys like Francis Ngannou, Curtis Blaydes, Tybura, Volkov, Lewis. They're now dominating the top 10. You have Stipe Miocic continuing his reign as champion. What a crazy year 2017 was. Now, we are halfway through 2018, but I can say with certainty that 2018 is the craziest year in the UFC heavyweight division. Not only because of the title fight coming up, but because of all of the changes already to the top 10. So let's watch. Stipe Miocic defeated Francis Ngannou. That didn't change anything in the division though. A big change that did happen, Curtis Blaydes defeated Mark Hunt, bumping himself all the way up to the top 5 and Mark Hunt off of the top 5. And then Cain Velasquez Inactivity removed from the rankings Curtis Blaydes up to number 4, Derrick Lewis to number 5, and Alexei Oleinik back to the top 10. And another crazy result, Alexander Volkov defeats Fabricio Werdum, claiming the number 3 spot at heavyweight, bumping Werdum down to number 5 and Lewis off of the top 5. And then Fabricio Werdum, you know what? Forget about him. He gets caught by USADA. He's out of the rankings. And who replaces him? Junior Dos Santos. Yep, Junior Dos Santos is back from suspension. He gets slotted in at number 5. But then the rankings committee thought, that's a bit too much of a push. Derrick Lewis, you're now top 5. And to end off the craziness, Curtis Blaydes defeats Alistair Overeem, taking the number 2 spot at heavyweight. And this is what the UFC heavyweight division looks like before Stipe Miocic fights Daniel Cormier for the heavyweight championship of the world. This is a very different look for the UFC heavyweight division. Miocic champion, Ngannou number 1, Blaydes number 2, Volkov number 3, Lewis at number 5. These are heavyweights that haven't been in the UFC for 10 years, aren't known by fans from the early 2000s. This is a new crop of fighters that are relevant from 2015, 16, 17, and 18. This is a brand new talent pool that has now taken over the heavyweight division. You even have Tybura, Tuivasa, and Oleinik down at number 8, 9, and 10. The heavyweight division has changed dramatically. Before I was going to do this video, I thought, I don't think the heavyweight division has changed that much. It hasn't been that interesting. But this year alone, this half year alone, has changed everything. You don't see Velasquez, you don't see Dos Santos, you don't even see Werdum anymore. There are a lot of long-time heavyweights that reigned over the UFC that are gone, and we have this new crop of talent that has just lit a fire under the division. And before we do that, Daniel Cormier could be at the top of the division in a week's time. This is just the craziest time for the heavyweight division. I'm super excited for this fight, and I'm excited for the heavyweight division for the first time in a long time. Thank you for watching this video. This is the complete history of the UFC heavyweight rankings. Let me know what you think of the video. Who do you want to see next as far as the UFC rankings go? Do you want me to do light heavyweight to see the rise and fall of Jon Jones? Do you want to see me do bantamweight? Do you want to see me do a women's division back to the Ronda Rousey era? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. That always helps. Thanks.